welcome and thank you all for coming. I'm Patrice Metro. I'm the chair of the Situate Democratic Town Committee. Thank you to all of our members who's helped put all of this together and brought all the refreshments. And I just wanted to say that although we're Democrats, this is a nonpartisan event. It was open to everybody who wanted to come and that's the spirit in which we are here for. So we're focused on helping us to learn from our distinguished speakers. Thank you also to Seth Pfeiffer, who's up in the cloud someplace helping to manage remotely. This tech is new to us, so you're going to have to keep your fingers crossed and hope we've got people online listening. We've got everybody in the audience, and there's one little microphone, I guess, that's supposed to do everything, but Seth insists it's going to work for us all. But it does mean we're going to have to be sort of carefully quiet, make sure everybody's turned off their cell phones. Probably haven't turned mine off yet, but keep that in mind. A couple of things, looks like many people know already, exit there, exit out there, toilets out that door and around the corner, there's a kitchen there if anybody needs that for anything. So thank you to our presenters. We have local Situate residents, Bill Schmid and Paul Bolton, who are going to discuss domestic and foreign disaster and development assistance and how local, national, and international aid advances the interests of the USA and the wider world. So Bill Schmid served with FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, since 2017. He was most recently a Federal Disaster Recovery Officer until he retired just in August. Bill's been deployed to over 30 disasters from Alaska to Puerto Rico for earthquakes, wildfires. I definitely prepared for any hurricanes and flooding. He's supported many response and recovery efforts across the nation in many capacities, including team leader for FEMA Region 1, Emergency Services Branch Director, Lead Emergency Support, Incident Manager, Management Assistant Team, and Branch Director for Infrastructure. Paul Bolton is a senior scientist at Johns Hopkins University Bloomberg School of Public Health. He has over 30 years experience in disaster and development programming in more than 30 low and middle income countries, working with governments and NGOs. From 2020 to 2023, he served as USAID's first mental health coordinator, and in this role, he acted as an advocate for foreign assistance support for health, both within and outside the agencies. He's continued this role since leaving USAID in 2023, broadening the scope from health to advocacy for foreign assistance generally. Bill is going to start us off, and I'm going to ask that you save your questions until Bill and Paul have both made their presentations. And the people who are online are muted, so if they could raise their hand using that hand icon, if you have a question or comment, and I will unmute you at the end. Thanks very much, and over to Bill to start.
Great job of an intro, and thank you folks for coming. For those of you who don't know me, you will not have a problem hearing my voice. It echoes loudly in places even when I don't want it to. Thank you for providing your support to this. How fortunate we are to be in a town that cares, and that on the end of a long holiday weekend, people still take the time to show support or interest on this, what we feel very, very important subject. It's tough times we live in now, and as we said at the outset, this is going to be an apolitical discussion, but that doesn't prevent us from pointing to, underscoring, and educating ourselves about the things that are going on. And with our combined expertise, we're going to do just that. Do you want to go ahead and hit the next slide? We're going to take a view of disasters that's a broader view than what most of us think of as disaster, especially FEMA got here. You know, normally when you associate a disaster, you're thinking earthquake. Go ahead and hit some cute little buttons there. And do yeah, there it is. So normally when you think of disasters, you think of natural disasters. And you may be acquainted with FEMA enough to know that we do a lot of work We did, we do, a lot more than that. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But for today's discussion, we're asking you to expand the concept of disasters to really this. It's a term that includes human, environmental impacts to people acutely that are affected. You know, there are communities that are adversely affected. So we're talking about larger areas of concern around the world, not just here, that include war, starvation, poverty. And these are the things that Paul has worked so hard for with USAID and Johns Hopkins. And he'll talk more on a global perspective on that. So you want to hit? So I'm going to talk a little bit about the local consequences, the regional results, the national impacts. FEMA is a national asset. So by that definition, our international influence is small, theoretically non-existent, but it's not. And then Paul will, of course, widen that scope to international influences. What we really want to get out of this is, when we were talking about this, and thank you very much to the Situate Democratic Town Committee for hosting us, they said we don't want to just get preached at. We want to know what we can do. So we're going to talk about what the things that we see that you may not be aware of that are happening now. And then take a look at what's going to be happening in the future. What we can reasonably predict will be the impacts. And the real challenge here is, what are the impacts to you, to us, here and now? Because it's happening now, and we're going to outline some of the things that are happening now. And if we come out of anything from today, it's that it's a raised joint awareness of what's happening around us, and hopefully the impetus to do something about it before it's too late. Because some of these things that are happening, some of the things that we'll discuss, some of the things that we'll review are getting close to, we might be a little late to this part. But on the other hand, hope is not lost. The light still shines, people are here, interested. And that gives us something to use as a springboard going forward. So go ahead, Paul, thanks. So, well, actually you can hold that for a second. So part of the concern about what's happening with FEMA and all federal agencies is obvious. There are dramatic funding cuts going on. There are dramatic staffing cuts going on. And those things, you don't need me to tell you that. You already are aware of it. But we may not know, the states may not know, the communities may not know the downstream consequences, the ripple effect. What we see now, when the National Weather Service has their funding cut and their staffing cut, what are the implications of that? When DEP, EPA, I'll keep acronyms to a minimum, I hope, all get cut, what is the interrelationships that are formed with the other federal agencies, including FEMA, that are going to be adversely affected when they come to Situate to help us with the flood? What can we reasonably expect now from federal agencies after a lot of them have been decimated? And after the increasing frequency of FEMA being called has been multiplying year after year after year after year. And also the type of things that they're asking FEMA to do have been multiplying year after year after year. FEMA's main job is to coordinate other federal agencies. That was my job here in Region 1. A state needs help. What is it that they need? We call Department of Transportation. We call the EPA. We call Search and Rescue. FEMA is the only agency in the U.S. government that can assign other government agencies to go work. Go do this now. We call it a mission assignment. We write mission assignments. The current administration said there's got to be a whole lot less writing those checks for mission assignments to other federal agencies. They've already said that. So part of tonight is going to be talking about what we know is happening. Count on it, it's already kind of done, or leading into it. And then what we can reasonably think may be the consequences of that. So next one. Oh, come on, Vanna. There we go. So here is a quick overview of some of the federal agencies' proposed budget cuts. Astronomical numbers. Astronomical numbers. I was at a rapid deployment meeting, and these are the people that respond to hazardous waste situations. Giant oil tanker, remember in Rhode Island a couple months ago, whatever? Giant oil tanker overspilled and closed 95. And this team of experts, EPA, all these people get together and say, okay, what do we have to do? NOAA, all these people. So we had about 25, 30 federal agencies represented. And we all get up and say, okay, here's what we're doing this quarter. Here's the things that concern us. And to an agency, every single one that got up there, and these are big time agencies, they're saying, well, we're just trying to compensate for what we're seeing now, the staffing cuts, the loss of expertise in the field, the loss of grants. We are all just trying to figure out what our agency is going to do next. And I was glad to talk, and I went up there and I said, we all share that common issue that we're all trying to address. But what we have failed to do and continue to fail to do at this moment is find how that's all going to affect us when we all need to show up. When we all have to go to a disaster, how are that interconnectivity that we have built for so long, and quite frankly, the country has relied on us so deeply, how is that all going to be affected when we're looking for other agencies to interact with us? So you have a question?
Those are cuts that are baked into the president's 26
That's correct.
budget.
Yes, yep, and so it's not necessarily a done deal, but this little line here too is the executive action things that are being baked into also what they're doing without congressional approval, et cetera. So these are the things that they have promised, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the future of FEMA, try to keep it to the things that I do know a little bit about. So that's just kind of an overview of some of the cuts that are being proposed. And the State Department piece will obviously have a lot of correlation to what Paul's going to talk about later. Go ahead. I have to watch time. So now we're going to talk about what's going on with FEMA. 30% of the workforce, right off the top. See. When I decided to retire, my boss in Washington, D.C., who I admired greatly, I thought this guy did a really good job of coordinating the nation's response, being responsible to the other federal agencies that we work with, but also taking care of the people that work for him. And he left. He was under such tremendous pressure. This is the time that the new secretary had been announced, and they had just bounced the other secretary who was there for speaking his mind, frankly. And then I was deployed to Santa Fe at that time. I was deployed to New Mexico doing the wildfires. And we've been there for a couple months. And my second favorite guy, the guy that I had kind of looked up to in FEMA since I started, quit the same day. Because he was under such pressure from the administration to say things and do things that he no longer felt that were in his interest or the country's. So we're not only talking about 30% of the workforce, we're talking about carving off a segment of the workforce that is experienced, has developed relationships. All of that cannot be replaced by a political appointee that doesn't have any experience. And we're seeing that. To this point, FEMA hasn't really been tested. It's been tested one tiny little microcosm. That was a very local disaster in a very small area. And I think that the system as a whole obviously failed. And that was part of my job. I helped coordinate search and rescue at early stages, and we always pre-stage. So a 72-hour delay in the search and rescue was problematic. Not blaming anybody who knows what could have been, woulda, shoulda, coulda type of thing. But that was a very localized disaster that only happened in a small segment of one state. Had it been a large disaster or a multi-state impact, who knows? And we're still kind of dreading that moment. So, some of the impacts. This is just the grants part and the state level programs. One of the bottom lines here is that what the federal government is doing is reducing its size. And that automatically demands the state pick up those gaps. Does the state have the expertise in doing that? Given the fact that they have relied for so long on the system that has been in place for so long, are they reasonably prepared to pick up that mantle? I would argue not. Now, theoretically, there will be money thrown at the issue, but money without the staffing, without the expertise, and without the experience is going to end. When we're talking about money, part of FEMA's job is to make sure the money that we allocate to a state goes to where it is. FEMA's no longer going to be doing it. I was deployed in Harvey to a state, Texas, and we were giving tremendous amounts of money to the state. And I was in a rural area. And we're like, okay, anytime the spigot could get open, that'd be great. And what we found was that one of the larger urban areas, Houston, was taking giant proportions of that money, and it wasn't getting downstream to us. And this is a concern going forward if there's no oversight to grants, if there's no oversight to funding programs, regardless of how little there is. How is it going to be distributed? And we'll talk a little bit more about that because some of the impacts are going to be obvious there. Who is going to be the largest loser in that equation? It's pretty obvious. So we talked about the loss of institutional knowledge. There are areas that are being targeted relentlessly that FEMA has been involved in. Our former secretary, had embraced climate change as one of her key pillars, because it's scholars and scientists say that it's leading to more disaster, more natural disaster. So let's address some of the roots of the problem to help mitigate future disasters. Now that's all. So talking about disaster risk reduction is going to be a challenge. Preparedness, grants, hazard mitigation. How do we keep this from happening again? Those seawalls are being funded not only by you, the taxpayer, but FEMA is helping. And it's been a long, arduous process for the city to do this. And that we all readily admit that things could be better. Unequivocally, things could get better in every federal agency, and Paul will talk about that with his agency. But what we're seeing happening now is not the way to do it, clearly. So this part kills me. There's some things that you go, oh, it's so bad, it's so bad. And then you come across one and says, that's just malicious, for lack of a better expression. FEMA Corps and AmeriCorps are young kids that are coming out of high school, don't know what they want to do. Maybe it's emergency management. Maybe I want to be a policeman when I grow up. Who knows? But they join these FEMA Corps. It's much like Peace Corps, but domestic. Okay? So they get paid literally nothing. I think it's like $12 a day. They all troop around in a van together. They all sleep on mattresses. What in the holy hell are we saving by cutting that program? It can't be even a remote decimal point on a number. It's just, that one kind of hurt. It's probably not the right one to pick out, but it did. So we're going to talk a little bit about this, but what's going to happen now, or what's already happening, is the disaster declaration process is being politicized. Massachusetts has a large event. It's a giant snowstorm, blizzard of 68 or whatever it was, 78. And they appeal to the governor. The governor says, okay, every little city, every little town has exhausted their ability to cope with this. They have, every cop is out there on the street. Every fire truck is doing its thing. We've called Rhode Island. They've given us everything. We don't have any more resources. We need help. That goes to the governor, to the president. Literally the president's text. He signs it and says, okay, Massachusetts, you now have a federal disaster and you are eligible for funds under the Stafford Act. That is going to, that equation may be altered, and we're going to show you some numbers here, when we start to review, is it a red state or is it a blue state? Is it a governor that I'm fighting with in Maine, or is it someone that we're closely affiliated with? And then you take that piece of the equation and then layer on what they call cost share. Standard cost share would be, if in a Stafford Act, is 75% assumed by the federal government, 25% assumed by the state. When you ask for a federal declaration, that's what you sign up for. And we're talking billions of dollars on a big disaster. So it ain't no free ticket when you say, give us help, FEMA. But that cost share can be adjusted. It can be adjusted to 90-10. It can be adjusted to 0, or it can be adjusted to more. So part of the things that we said today is, I'm going to tell you how things work, and then we could all speculate what may happen when you know that there is some discretion in disaster declaration or cost sharing. The lack of resources will diminish the federal capacity to support communities. Period. Now, what are the communities going to do about it? What is the state going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? Because the disaster, and we're going to talk about this, the disaster is here and now. It's happening, but we just haven't felt it yet. So keep going, Paul. I'll start to spit it up. So we talked a little bit about what FEMA does normally. And we train for all this. We train all the time for this. 1 year, it's power one. If you want to get your mind blown, start trying to get into this nuclear rad equation and blooms and ho. So when we say to the state, hey, best of luck, in New England, what are we going to exercise? Snowstorms, floods. But if we have a nuke rad accident, or if we had an earthquake, when you look at disaster funding in any town, city, state, it's way down here in the funding scheme. So if you have to prioritize what little money you have for disaster training and exercises, what are you going to choose? What's most likely to happen? The ability to call FEMA and say, hey, you got any earthquake guys hanging around? Or do the other states have earthquake experts that you have trained that you can bring here? So it's not just us preparing for, Front Street getting flooded. It's these other things that could maybe, dear God, let's hope not happen, that we don't really have any radar out on. When Paul and I were talking, he's going to share things. I said, I had no idea. Whoa, good Lord, and he said, well, are you telling people what FEMA does? I'm like, everybody knows what FEMA does. We do this, 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 and this. And I said, and we do the Super Bowl. And she said, wait, what? So what happens in large events, large national events, they give it a SEER level. Security, I don't know what it is. Security Enhancement Risk Assessment. Boston Marathon is a SEER 1. So we coordinate with the FBI, with EPA. We fly drones over the, I say this, I'm going to say it. We fly drones over the marathon route to look for nefarious devices before. And a lot of people didn't know that. So 4th of July was a SEER 2 this year. So depending on how high they rate it is how much federal support it is. But once again, we see FEMA as that coordinating linchpin that the nation relies on, even in these type of things. So with this kind of thoroughbred training that FEMA is continually doing, there's been a relationship that's been built in the federal government with FEMA. Give it to them, they'll figure it out. Perfectly, in time, on budget, that's another question. But FEMA has been relied upon to do a lot of things. So what is natural in an administration that needs to get stuff done before they get chewed up on it? It's like, give it to the people that we trust. So now, the immigration issue, terrorism, cyber warfare, drone use. If you want to talk about two things that are going to change our world, that one and this one, and then put them together, drone and AI. It's going to be a geometric pattern of influence. Drones are going to change the way FEMA does business. It's going to change the way a lot of people do business. So we're in this business. We've also been dragged into some international incidents type of things that really is not within our spectrum, but because we have trained experts in that field, they kind of move over that way. We have more little tricky things to go, so just hit twice, and then I'll do some really cute things. So we talked about how the political, and one more, influencing, wasn't it? No, one back down. Political influence is already a part of what's happening now. I mean, every day, you heard what happened in the CDC in the last few days, and more today. So every day, and certainly FEMA disaster response and recovery is not immune to it. So how will political influence affect our ability to do response and recovery? But on the other side of the equation, how will our political influence help decide things? How can we insert influence to change some of the things that we're looking at here? Go ahead, Paul. So in a larger scale, I showed Paul this. I said, here's the things that are happening. I'm not making this up. Funding allocation is changing. Adjustments in funding formulas are changing. The criteria of who gets disaster assistance, who doesn't, it's all changing. And he's like, yeah, what does that mean? I'm like, it's obvious what it means. I do this every day. It's not obvious what it means. So we're going to go into it a little bit, very little bit. Hang in there, folks. You're doing great. About what this is the larger picture of things that are happening, but we need to almost personalize it. So we talked about mitigation efforts. Part of what we do here in Situate is like, okay, we know this area of floods, so let's raise it. Who's ever involved, we have members of the Waterways Commission here. They're involved in the new Harbor Masters building. And part of that is, how do we mitigate that area for flooding? Because the parking lot's going to be underwater. That means, affiliated buildings will be underwater. So how do we mitigate, and what funds can we get to help mitigate that? It's not going to be FEMA funds, I'll tell you that much. Community engagement, and this is what it comes all down to for us. How many people, we know two things, I can say definitively two things that the new administration have said, we ain't doing it anymore. One of the things is when we respond to a disaster, we have DSA crews, disaster survivor assistance. These are some of the coolest people on God's great planet. They're some of the very first people on the field. Disaster area is just a wreck. And they get their boots on and go knocking on doors. Hi, are you all right? Are you aware that FEMA is here and down the street? Do you need help? Can we get you transportation? Here, call the 1-800 line, da, 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 da. And I've gone with these teams to different disasters, and their strength and bravery and commitment to make sure whoever is not getting the message gets it was so heartening. It really encourages you to, if these people can do this, then we can certainly, I can certainly push papers from the desk. There were areas I said, don't go up those stairs. They're like, if there's somebody there, I'm going. And off they went. We're out of that business. We're not doing that anymore. And who's going to suffer there? Anybody who speaks English as a second language, if they are not in mainstream media, if they don't, Twitter or whatever they do, all those people are going to be marginalized. And everywhere we go, this isn't just in Texas or New Mexico. When I'm in Rhode Island, we find Vietnamese fishing villages. We've had, to a much lesser extent, but let's look at Fall River, the Portuguese population there is enormous. Will they be plugged into mainstream, things like that? So DSA, see you later. Sheltering, not us anymore. Good luck, states. And the part of the complication with the sheltering equation is not only, okay, but Red Cross does it. Paul's going to talk about this. Where do you think Red Cross funding comes from? And what can we reasonably assume is going to happen if Homeland Security, which is FEMA, which is the other acronym, NICE, what's going to happen in these disaster recovery centers, DRCs? So if you're not mainstream America, they're probably it's going to be a chilling effect on who is going to seek help. So take a look. Now your mind's starting to click. It's like, oh my good God, now what's going to happen? What about legal resources for people? What about procedural counseling? When we go out to a disaster, we talk about be empathetic. You're probably talking to a person who's having the worst day of their life ever. Grief counseling, sorry, not going to happen. All of the support structures that we give to these people that are so grievously impacted, it's taken off the table. Now, can the states pick it up? Who knows? But that mantle hasn't been passed. No one has said, this is what we will give you money for, this is what we'll give you support for, this is what are still within our boundaries to do. No one has set those boundaries. And when I say no one, I mean no one. No one, including the states, which means our community leaders are also, I talked to the chief of police today. So let's get together at some point after this so we can talk about the way that you see this playing out with the state of Massachusetts. Insurance. Well, one of our big things today is housing. The housing market, there are times when we go to a disaster, if we don't get that town up on its feet within a month or so, it ain't coming back. That it was just holding on, and this disaster is just enough to push it right off. Housing is the same way. There's a housing crunch everywhere. I met with Sam's yesterday, and they get people referred to them, Sam's and Citrus Beauty Christmas. They get people referred to them because they don't have a place to live, or they're not able to make enough money to get a place, that recurring cycle. So a disaster, Now, what has happened to HUD, we could go back, but we're not gonna, to the HUD funding. Someplace in the 70, 80%. How's that gonna look? I mean, how's that work? Mental health. We all realize that our medical system has been taxed previously. It barely crawled out from COVID. It barely got out of the ooze of COVID. And it's in crisis now. The medical system is in crisis. Now we're talking about changes to Medicare, Medicaid, that are going to have impacts across the board. And what is the natural consequence of that? Prices will go up, ER visits will be astronomical. Insurance, building codes, they're already softening building codes. They're already softening, they're already changing floodplains. So that may be good if you're building a house on the water. You know, yeah, I got one less thing to worry about. But when the storm does come, then we can pay the piper. So there are inevitable consequences to these things that we just haven't realized yet, and that we're not really looking at because it hasn't happened yet. My contention is it is happening now, and we're going to talk about that. The chilling effect on internet, and here's my suave transition. The chilling effect on international affairs. The way that our neighbors, our longtime supporters across the world look at us now has changed dramatically. And the question is, how badly has that been affected or damaged? Can we recover? So we talked about SEER ratings for large events. World Cup is obviously a SEER 1 rating, and it is a nightmare trying to organize this and organize security. Absolute nightmare. And now we are getting a lot of pressure from other countries. When the Boston Marathon explosion happened, you know that the state government is mandated to find any foreign diplomat within a certain amount of time. So Amsterdam was calling and said, I just heard you had a explosion on the Boston Marathon. They don't know where Brookline Ave is. They don't know where Newbury Street is. It's downtown Boston. Where's my ambassador? We took the cell communications down. That's the standard thing in terrorism. So we couldn't call up and say, hey, where are you? So we sent police cars to every emergency room in every hospital in the city of Boston to find out if any of them were in. When the Titanic stuff, that explosion stuff blew up, there was an international component. And I got a call, heard that. I got a call from some ambassador someplace asking, the hell do I know, buddy? You need a bottle of water, I can get that. But, so I had to escalate that, and we finally called the Coast Guard. There's another relationship that we have very, very strong ties with. We're able to manipulate that process to get them the answers. So we're going to come back to this, but I just kind of tried to set the stage of what we see happening now and what we think and reasonably assume are going to be some of the issues that are coming. And then once Paul talks about the international aspect of this, then we're all going to get back together and say, okay, now that we've been sharing that good news, what's next? And hopefully we'll come out of here with some impetus to do something, or at least feel like your support and attendance tonight was worth the effort. So up to you, Paul, and I'll do the Vanna White thing, right? Here is, when I said we have to bring it home, here's the personal impacts. Here's what's happening to our communities. The cancellation of the BRIC program, building resilience and infrastructure in your community. That funding's gone, see it. It's already done. Cuts to hazard mitigation we talked about. Hollowed out agencies and those relationships. So it's not just FEMA when there is a oil slick in the middle of Situate Harbor and we're calling EPA, what are their rapid response capabilities now? And what will they do on their own? When we assign federal agencies, we write them a check. We say there's an OFA, other federal agencies, and there's direct federal assistance, and then things that they are charged to do under their own authority. So if there's a sunken ship in the middle of, well, it's in the harbor, it's jurisdictional, but it's the Coast Guard. Clearly it's the Coast Guard. We're not writing you a check for that. That's your job. Go get the sinking ship. But if it's outside of their jurisdictional parameters, then we'll say, okay, EPA, we're hiring you to go do this. Go clean up Scituate Harbor. Here's a check. Now, what the current administration is inferring is that mission assignment process will no longer go to those federal agencies. So the implication is that they will do it under their own authority, and they won't. Then what? And I'm telling you that they won't, because we've tried it. They're like, not ours. We don't have the staffing. We don't have the money. We don't have the budget. We can't do it. So we write a check and know something they can do it. But now it's going to be, can't do it. And what are you going to do? You just cut our staff by 30%. How would you like us to do this for you? Residents may face long-term economic consequences in the wake of disaster. But the recovery is going to take longer. The economic infrastructure to get rebuilt is going to take longer. And that's going to take a toll. And then we've said it. The marginal communities, and excuse my term for marginal, but the people that aren't mainstream, the people that are not in the, the right percentage of the right populace to get the message and get the assistance and feel comfortable getting it and going to ask for help, are in dire straits. Impaired with less federal support, communities are going to have struggle. We're not budgeting for this. Scituate's already done their budget, right, Freya? We don't have all of a sudden, let's just go dip into the other pocket for this money to do disaster relief. We didn't budget for this. We didn't know this was coming. We still don't even know what it's going to look like. How do you budget for it? Strain on local government, we're going to feel it. So the impacts of this are going to be felt across the nation. However, the drain on resources is disproportionate. If you had to take a quick guess at what states are the most reliant on FEMA funding in disaster response, would you guess Texas? Would you guess Florida? Would you guess Louisiana? And what do they all have in common? So, well, geez, I kind of gave it away there. Thank God it wasn't a test, huh? So, last thing, arbitrary decisions are making the private sector and all of us nervous, which investing in the U.S. economy becomes a question. I was trying to retire, and now I'm petrified because I don't know what's going to happen, Put it in that stock, put it in this stock, buy gold, buy bullions, buy Melania coins. No, stop. So the demand for higher risk premiums is going to lead to the U.S. pulling back further and adversely affect our international standing. Cue the international guy. Thanks, Doug, for your attention. We'll get back to you. Okay.
Thanks, Bill. I'm not blessed with the same volume of voice as Bill, but I'm going to try to project. If you can't hear me in the back, just say so, and I'll try to talk louder. Bill and I were originally going to have half an hour each, but I knew it was going to take longer. So my slides are shorter, and my presentation is shorter because we wanted to leave time for questions, and we figured they'd be planned. and then you can take the conversation in whatever direction you wish. Here I'm really talking about, I guess, what I saw as a foreign assistance person. I spent most of my career receiving funds, almost all from US government. And then, as you heard, I spent 3 years on the other side of the fence being a USAID official. And so I can talk about it from both ends. I can't talk about what Bill said about we're seeing a reduction of this amount, a reduction of that amount. No, we didn't experience reductions, we experienced demolition. So everything I talked to you about, when you say how much has that been reduced, it's pretty much close to 100%. The stuff that I'm going to talk about, we just don't do anymore. But I hope that one day we'll do them again. And in talking to people, I realized that about half of the people I meet had never heard of USAID before January. And all they've ever heard, in most cases, is that it was evil and corrupt. And so, if that's the only thing you've ever heard about an agency or about foreign assistance, I'm not that surprised that you think that way. So I'm trying to give it. This is what I saw when I was doing this kind of work. Yep. So USAID, through the Office of Foreign Disaster Assistance, did acute disaster relief. And we did very much what Bill's talking about in terms of responding to acute disasters. And the idea is when there's a disaster and it exceeds the local capacity to respond, we were part of bringing in the additional resources to help the response. So we had a particular focus. One was that all over the world, when there's flooding, there's fire, there's famine, they usually tend to happen over and over in the same places. And so that's where the poorest of the poor live, because the wealthy don't want to live in those places. So we naturally found ourselves with acute disasters helping the poorest people. And very often in many countries, there were people that their own governments weren't helping. So we were actually often taking a role in government in countries that even the government either didn't prioritize or just didn't have the resources. But we would seek out who were the worst affected people, and that's where we focused. We weren't building, rebuilding resources for wealthy people. This was really very targeted. The other thing is that we think of acute disaster relief as very much what FEMA does, but we also thought about chronic disaster relief. And so we always saw these things as being chronic disasters. So there was a big focus on poverty, big focus on war, responding to war and preventing it. And then diseases. Right? Epidemic diseases, of course, but also endemic diseases like poor nutrition. And then rights violations. We're not just about the poorest of the poor, we were about the marginalized people. And very often in many countries, the marginalized people are the women, children, particular ethnic groups, particular religious groups. And I was very proud of the way in which we tended to target those folks and say, okay, we're going to help them when no one else was. In talking in the last 6 months to different audiences, I found some kind of myths and or misunderstandings about this. And so I wanted to address those a little bit. Next slide. One of the things we see about poverty is that sometimes people think, well, you're just giving out this money to people and they don't have to do much. They receive this money, it's largesse from the US population and it's money that we could spend here. But my experience was always that every time we had a program that was poverty alleviation, people really tried to make the absolute best use of those resources that they possibly could. And what these kids are is we had an education program, or at least World Vision had an education program that was being supported by USAID. And we found these kids in classrooms at school. But then when I was walking back to an encampment at night, I found that they were all gathered under this street light because they didn't have electricity at home. So they would attend school during the day, and then they'd all be clustered under the street lamp, which was the only electrical thing they had, and they were trying to do their homework under the street lamp. And I just found that with every kind of project we did. When we did agricultural programs, people tried to make the best use of the seed and the nutritional supplements. it was really something of like an investment, right? It wasn't just, we're going to give you money and you'll survive. It was really programming and with cooperation of local people. What's the best we can do with this money? Next. War. So we tend to think of war as war between armed groups. But we've just seen, in the last century or more, it started out as war between armed groups. Now it's war against civilians. So most of the wars that we talk about are wars against civilians. This is a mass grave in Rwanda after that genocide. But I could show you pictures like this from other wars more recently. So, for example, when you hear, what's going on in Gaza is terrible, it's a conflict against the civilian population, and it is, but it's not unusual. Syria was just as bad or worse. Armed groups all over the world target civilian populations. So when we go in and we respond to wars, when we go in and we try and prevent wars, it's this kind of thing that we're mainly dealing with, trying to help civilians. Next. Things like World Vision, again, we would focus on the most vulnerable people. So this was a rehabilitation program for children. This was for the many children who were orphaned from war. So you'd have like whole villages or whole populations that really were just children or children and their grandparents, or children or just children very young. And so no one to look after. And again, very often the government wasn't doing anything. Other groups weren't doing anything, so these programs would develop. Next. We did anti-disease programs. And it's interesting, sometimes you think about disease programs as let's give people medication, let's give people access to treatment. But we're also about very much trying to understand what was causing illness and how could we prevent it. So, for example, this was a program in Zambia because in parts of Africa, people believed that if you had HIV, you had sex with a virgin, they would get the disease and you would lose it. So we actually had people go out with HIV purposely trying to have sex with virgins. And so these would be part of these programs of like, this doesn't work. This isn't the right way to go about this. So it wasn't, disease programs are about a lot more than just providing healthcare. They're about providing prevention. And this was a gender-based program that was supported by UNICEF. But guess who supported UNICEF? That was us. One of the things I get kind of mad at the UN and UNICEF and others about is they're always claiming these programs and they forget to give the US the adequate acknowledgement that we're often the engine or were the engine behind many of their programs. So how's foreign assistance done? So first thing is, although a lot of foreign assistance was done by USAID, there were all these other departments that were involved in foreign assistance. So, we have programs from the State Department, particularly for refugees. The Department of Labor was really interesting and really helpful because that was how do we develop better workforces in these countries to work against poverty, right? How can we protect workers' rights so they're not exploited, so they can have some of the wealth of the country? The Department of Defense, obviously, a couple of things there. We're trying not only to get involved in keeping forces apart, but there was a fair bit of diplomacy involved in defense activities. Agriculture, we would take like huge amounts of agricultural products from the United States. We had so many programs of buying resources from farmers here in the United States, sending it over to places that couldn't adequately provide for their own population. The thing that I always remember, I think the most about, because I was involved in it, was the Fluffer-Nut program. Has anyone heard of that? It was basically taking peanuts from Georgia peanut farmers, turning it into a peanut butter-like paste, which was highly nutritious, and giving it to kids from the age of about 1 to the age of 5. And it had this huge dividend in terms of their later life. They would be less stunted, right? So they grow to their full adult stature. Their brains would develop better. For the women, they would develop a full pelvis so that when they had children, they could actually deliver the children. Whereas if they stayed malnourished and had narrow pelvises, we just have the whole problem with obstetric issues and perinatal death. And then Health and Human Services, that includes like CDC. So CDC would go out to different countries and provide technical support to different countries around disease control. So it was almost a whole of government approach. And yet all of this was 0.87% of the budget. There was an article a few years ago that said that, did a survey of Americans and said that Americans thought of about 20 to 25% of the federal budget was foreign assistance. And yet it isn't. So we joked at the time, we said, well, what if we went out to everyone and we said, would you agree to limiting foreign assistance to 1%? Imagine all the extra money we would get from doing that. But of course we didn't. But it's really a tiny fraction. It was costing the average American less than $2 a week for all of the foreign assistance that we were doing. And then who did it? One of the things that was an irony for me when they said, when I was told, USAID programs were ego and corrupt, we didn't do hardly any programs, right? We talked to World Vision, CARE, Catholic Relief, all of these well-respected organizations. We talked to them, we talked to the governments, we talked to the stakeholders, and then together we'd say, what's needed? What do we think we should be doing? And then we'd give the money to those groups, and they were the ones who did it. Our role was the responsible spending of money and the responsible planning and then the responsible accounting for it. But it was these organizations that did almost all the program, not us. We support international organizations because we need to have allies in healthcare, right? So we work with WHO to get data from around the world, right? We work with WHO and PAHO, which is the Pan American Health Organization, to work on regional threats. So COVID was a regional threat. TB, drug-resistant TB, is a current global threat, right? HIV remains as a threat. It can always come back. And this was something I was heavily involved in, was research. Research to try to make programs better. So we had a responsibility. Every single project, we were like, how can we make this program more effective? How can we make this program more efficient? How can we do better? So we learned over the 60 years that USAID was in existence. And our research informed not only USAID programming, but informed the programming of other countries as well. Next slide. So what did we do? What did we achieve? We saved more than 90 million lives in 20 years. And when I say that, I don't mean that we helped save 90 million lives. I mean, we actually did. But without us, 90 million people would be dead. We made better health for 95 million, focused on mothers and babies. It's always been a big focus. 23 million children who didn't have access to education had access to education. This was a strong focus on, has always been a strong focus on women, because there's a lot of countries where girls just don't get educated. My wife and I were out in Vancouver earlier this month, and we're on a tour. And on tours, they often say, everyone introduce themselves. So I said, hi, I'm Paul Bolton. I used to work for USAID. And across the road from me was this Filipino doctor. And he said, is it true that you guys have shut down all your programs? And I said, well, yes. He said, well, I grew up, all of my school books came from the US government. They were all donations from the US government. That's how we did our education at school. We never had a program. So here's this successful Filipino doctor riding around with us on the same tour. And he just looked so sad that we weren't doing that kind of thing anymore. And so do I. I feel sad too. But we're doing great things, right? Extreme poverty declined by 2 from 36% to 9%. Because sometimes I hear people say, well, you just give this money, nothing ever changes. It's always, the same old thing. We were making real progress. We were making incredible progress. See this number here, 2049, that's a date. The reason that's there is, I take a step back, ever since the dawn of civilization, there's been a lot more poor people than wealthy people, all through our existence. We were projected that in 2049, for the first time in human history, we were going to have more non-poor people in the world than poor people. Right? We were on target for that. Right? So the world was really changing. And just a few other things. We, with leadership of WHO, were responsible for the eradication of smallpox. In my world, the public health world, the guy who led that, Don Henderson, American guy, he's like God. It's like, this is the greatest public health American that there's ever been. You might never have heard of him, but we all know him. And we all know how him and US leadership led to that. Polio, we were making great progress. That was going to be the next disease that we eradicated. We're down now to wild cases in Afghanistan and Pakistan, but now with our support, it doesn't look like we're going to maintain to be on target to eradication. We might be in a situation where the disease actually returns. None of you get vaccinated against polio because there is no polio in this country, but it could return.
What I always do at this point is say, when I was deployed to New Mexico, for the first time in my life, I had to go check on my measles vaccine because there was concern in Texas and New Mexico about measles. And I'm like, who'd have thought in our era that this would now be a concern, but it is. Thank you.
Yep. Next.
Somehow that got
I think you
enlarged.
zoomed.
I think it
in.
got
it
enlarged.
It expanded.
When you
I think when you
touched
touched it, so maybe if you
it,
pinch
touch it
it.
again.
Oh.
Yes, like,
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
I did.
yeah, that, there, bring it there.
So, right. So, I mean, people always do wonder, right? Okay, it's a good thing to do those things we did, but what does America get out of foreign assistance? And the thing is, we got a lot out of it, right? When we do it right, which we increasingly did, people do admire, right? And like and envy. Some of you might think that people in other countries are kind of mad at us in some ways in the past because we're such a dominant country. Sometimes it seems like we're a bit high-handed. But I've only ever seen that attitude really amongst the wealthy in these countries. When you go and talk to people who benefited from the programs, they don't feel that way towards the United States. There's very much a feeling of, wow, there's this amazing country out there that actually does these wonderful things for people. And this translates into really helping us, right? When we need allies, when we need to form a group of countries together to really get something done, right? I mean, the Iraq War, I don't know how you feel about it, one or the other, but it wasn't that hard to get a coalition of countries together. When it came to disease control, right, with COVID, we also managed to do that to some extent, right? So when CDC goes out to these countries to control Ebola, right, mostly countries do not like people from other countries' governments coming in and telling them what to do. America was totally the exception. Right? They would welcome teams from the United States. There's a long-standing trust. And so when we can build stable and prosperous countries, one of the things I didn't know, but somebody at aid told me was, or pointed out, 10 of our 15 largest trade partners used to be recipients of aid from us. We built their economy, and now we trade and we all, hopefully still, trade and do business with them. Right? And so we benefit from that. And FAA foreign assistance reduces the need for military intervention. We were always very popular with the US military. I don't know if you remember, there's a General James Mattis. You might have heard his comment, which was, if you don't fund the State Department and foreign assistance fully, you better give me more money for more bullets. Right? And that is very much the attitude. We always worked really well with the military for two reasons. One is they saw us as partially preventing conflicts. The other is if you're walking in as a US soldier, if there's somebody there who's actually helping people, it makes you look good. So there was greater acceptance. And then much of the foreign assistance was just spent in the United States. It's supported tens of thousands of jobs. Everything from agriculture to business, to some kind to consulting. Yes, go ahead.
You are speaking more quietly.
I'm sorry. Thank you for letting me know. So a lot of the foreign assistance money was
Say that
actually,
to me.
was actually spent here in the United States and supported a lot of jobs of people who were proud and to do this kind of work. But I particularly think about business and agriculture as areas that really benefited from this kind of programs. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to hand over to Bill.
Yep.
Who's going to
For a little
go
bit.
through this.
Yep.
I tried to keep that short because it's not clear to me, like, you know, which direction you want to take this. Or if you want to focus on foreign assistance, I can talk for hours. I will if you give me a chance, but Bill, why don't you go and take it from here?
So what we talked about earlier is how do we bring it home? How do we make it poignant? How do we theoretically reward the people that are here? We are working, because you are here, we already have a step forward. A lot of people are either in neutral or reverse, and you guys are stepping into it, at least to raise your awareness or raise your level of understanding of the issues that are surrounding us. So why does it matter to us? The erosion of the standards that we have all built in our communities is happening now. We see it on an epic basis, or we see it individually in small, minute areas. The discussions, the way that we communicate has eroded so precipitously that it seems to present an incredible, almost insurmountable challenge to us all to do something. But because you're here, I would contend that you still have hope that things can be done. And that I think we all realize that the standards are eroding. I don't think that most of the populace is quite aware of how badly things are being taken away from us or dissolving in our fingers. So part of tonight was to say, hey, here's what we're seeing, help us raise the awareness.
Do you want to advance to the recommendations? Do you want to talk about the recommendations?
I'm going to, this one or next?
Next.
You're going to take the next one. Yeah.
Go to the next one.
Oh, all right, so
Just 'cause
the
it's 10 past.
environment we talked about. Yep, the environment we talked about. And there are points that we're reaching here. The DMZ, once we cross over the DMZ, it's questionable whether we can get it back. But the impetus now is to do something about it because it affects us all. And that's what we're talking about here. Changes to federal agencies, changes to FEMA, changes to the world that we live in, the worldwide international stage, all affect us to one degree or another. The threats of the geopolitical atmosphere have a tendency to isolate us. But because we can understand and see and empathize with a common goal, hopefully that will unite us all to do something. The further we let things go, the harder it's going to be to get back. It's fairly obvious. The question is, how far are we along down that path? And as I've been saying, I think we're a little further along than we all kind of admit. Paul's going to talk about, that rather stark people are dying piece.
Well, it's just a 8:15.
Yeah.
So I think we just talk about what we want people to do.
So, here it is. What can we do? When I've had the pleasure of being in communities after a disaster and being a part of that sense of community, when everybody comes out to help their neighbor, get the gas for the generator, get the kitten out of the tree. You know, we'd be going on knocking on doors, how are you? I'm fine. All I did was lose my roof and 2 horses go down the street. He needs help more than I do. There's this, when disaster strikes, there's this common sentiment that invades us all that says, let's get out and help. So what we're saying now is the disasters happen. So how do we tap into that community spirit? We can get back from here. We have the muscle memory. We've done it before. We have people like you in this room that are willing to participate. So we can do it. People want to know how. Part of this is deciding what do we stand for. At what point is the line drawn? And that I'll step over and say that is no longer something that I can live with. I need to do something about it. Or does it have to smack us over the head and then say, okay, well, now would be a good time to do something. So it's a very much a personal question. What do we stand for? What do I stand for? And what will motivate me to the next step? Some of the things we can do: strengthen our coordination in our communities. We are blessed to live in this town. I told you I'm a member of the SAMS board in Situate Community. Well, no. What is it, Joan? She told me, don't say you're on the board. You're a community member. I'm the community member of the SAMS board. And I'm honored to be on them. They do great work. So when I first came to Situate, I'm like, let's find somebody who's doing something good. All right, folks, I'm right in with you. Tell me what I can do, where I can do it. So find the community. Is it the Situate Democratic Committee? Is it facts? Anne Marie, where are you? What is happening in your local community that you can support? And then expand your horizons to the things that Paul is talking about. USAA, everybody knows Red Cross. Who is one of the major contributors to Red Cross? USAA, and that's not happening. Help us share this message. We're ready to go on the road. So if you have a community group, be it whatever, we are more than happy to do this. And we can tailor it. You know, we can refine it. I can shut up for a little while, maybe. But help us share the message. And lastly,
Well, from my point of view, so I work with a group of forcibly retired federal workers from across the country. And we have a big chapter, a big group in Washington, D.C. These are all volunteers. They go and see members of Congress all the time. And the Congress invite them in, and usually they get to talk to the staffers, they don't get to talk to the members, so they talk about these things. And what we hear with a lot of things, am I too? Okay. So when we talk to members of Congress, what we hear is that both Democrat and Republican, the country's moved on. I'm not hearing that this is an issue from any of my constituents. Right?
Wow.
And so what I would say, what would help out is to reach out to members of Congress, both Democrat and Republican, and say, no, this is still an issue. We still care about this, whether it's foreign assistance, whether it's domestic disaster assistance, or the other things that, the administration has canceled so far. I've been, I've talked to members of Congress from Alabama, right? And they say, well, thanks, Dr. Bolton, that's very nice, but we're not hearing this from anyone else, so we don't feel any pressure. And that was more the frank people. which I really appreciate when someone's frank and they tell you, I'm not going to do anything about what you said and this is why. Because they're not hearing from constituents, they're not hearing from us about which things we care
We're
about.
starting to throw things.
So from my point of view, from the issue of foreign assistance, as you know, people who receive foreign assistance, they don't vote, right? So if we think that's important, then it's up to us. At the moment, well, even in the past, we were funding foreign assistance with our spare change. But because the American economy is so huge, people don't realize around the world how big our economy is. When they see the Danes with their program and then they see the Americans with this program that's 10 times the size of the Dane, they think that America is this wonderfully generous country. And yet, we were actually giving less money per capita foreign assistance than every other developed country, right? But we looked so generous. So if there's kind of a dirty little secret in foreign assistance, it was that we were getting this amazing lead, right? And now what we have lost is trust. Not because we canceled the programs, but because of how we canceled.
Right.
Where we basically said to people, yes, you can rely on us to get your HIV drugs, so you don't need to fully do this, and then do it, and then suddenly say, hey, no more. So no time to adapt, no time to adjust. So people going to clinics and like, I need this drug to stay alive. Sorry, we don't have those drugs anymore. So we have 21 million people who were dependent on PEPFAR money for PEPFAR drugs for HIV that are just not getting them now. So that's not only them, but it's their unborn children who are going to get HIV going forward. It's how we went about this that is so egregious. We, over 60 years, to get off the high horse, over 60 years, we developed a database of all the things we'd ever done, what worked and what didn't work. And our current administration wiped it. So this is stuff we paid for and worked on for 60 years. And now, even today, I was on an email thing, a signal group, talking to each other. Does anyone have that report of that program we did? I don't know, maybe so-and-so has it. Go and ask him. There used to be one place where you could just find it in a second. And so all of that is gone. So we're going to kind of have to start again. But we do have, as you said, the muscle memory. We do have people who do this. But it's going to take a while for us to rebuild trust that this is something that we decide to do. But we were getting a great deal. We were buying soft power and influence around the world for, the pennies in our couch, so to speak. I apologize, but we wanted to give you time to...
Talk about your letter template.
Sorry?
The letter template that you developed.
Oh, I'm just saying that if anyone's interested, you can contact me at this email address and I can provide a template that you can send to your member of Congress. One of the problems is that some people...
again? Can you
Yeah,
put that?
I don't know
Yeah,
why
yeah.
it went blank.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Some people believe that some of these programs were brought back because Secretary Rubio signed waivers. But the problem with the waivers is that it's a piece of paper. If you've already sacked all the people who were supposed to implement the waiver, then it doesn't mean anything. And that's what pretty much happened across the board. All that restoration of life-saving programs didn't happen. But our members of Congress, they think we've moved on. And that we've, okay, we're more worried about other things now. Or you can, walk and chew gum at the same time. We can be concerned about other things and still be concerned about this and about domestic foreign assistance. We wanted to leave more time for questions. And that's really on us.
What?
I told you we're gonna need 2 hours.
Does anyone have-
Thank you for your amazing work, Paul.
Tired of it.
Amazing work. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions?
We'll open it up on the floor and then we'll go to the Zoom, okay? So, go ahead, yeah, Tracy?
Yeah, Paul, just a quick question for you. Do you find any resistance from the Massachusetts delegation regarding putting foreign aid back in?
Well, that's the funny thing. Up until recently, I was so focused on Republican members that I only recently heard from people saying, no, this is a Dem issue as well. So I have to admit to you, I've not yet reached out to our members here.
It's part of the things
But
that we're
I
working
have.
on together.
But the person who reached out to me pointed out, you realize that they haven't mentioned this for a long time, not since February, March. So it's not on the radar. You
So don't you believe that they flooded the zone with so many things that people lose track of what's missing? And I can't believe that the intelligent people in Congress don't realize that we're just so inundated with all the crap that's going on, that you're not going to get calls from your constituents saying, oh, AID is in trouble, they should be brought back. I just don't think that that's going to happen. I really believe that we're just so overwhelmed.
Fire hose, yeah.
I don't think that, maybe this is a sad thing to say, I don't think that much is going to happen before the midterm.
Before midterms?
Midterm election.
If they happen.
Yeah. But what I would say about foreign assistance is that when and my colleagues talk to members of Congress, both Democrat and Republican, almost all of them support foreign assistance. It's just that the Democrats, right, have moved on to other things. And the Republicans have not only moved on to other things, but they don't feel safe to say or do anything in the current climate. So even the ones that support foreign assistance, and they almost all do. In fact, over the last 60 years, we've had more funding from Republicans to foreign assistance than we have ever had from Democrats. I understand what you're saying. There's a lot of issues, but at the same time, you can walk and chew gum at the same time.
They'll do what's in their interest. If we convince them that it's in their self-interest, they'll do it. They'll find the.
It is kind of an ironic challenge for those of us in Massachusetts, though, because this is one of those, what do they call them, trifecta states. There's so much Democratic leadership, and I've written these letters to Markey and to Warren and to Keating, and they're in full-throated agreement with what I'm saying. Okay, well now what do I do? Because I'm preaching to the choir, and that's not getting me. What do I do?
We already have those converts in the.
Yeah, so I want to take it someplace else.
Yeah. And I mean, you could help target what you think people are voting, what congressmen are either receptive or vulnerable to this message.
Well, all I can say is that that's what they're saying to me, is that we're not hearing about this from our constituents, so we feel no pressure to take action.
And if you've ever tried to write a letter to a Republican outside of your area,
Oh,
they
yeah.
won't even read it.
Yeah, no, that's
Can't
the
even
thing.
send it.
No, we should be sending letters to our representatives here. They're not going to pay no. What I'm trying to do with the network of people around the country is, for example, we have a strong chapter in North Carolina, right? So we're trying to do the same kind of thing we're doing here in North Carolina and getting them to talk to their members of Congress about this.
Yeah. You referenced a chapter. Is there an organization of former?
Oh yeah,
Foreign workers?
there's a bunch.
Is there like something that we external people can follow, like a?
Increasingly, yes.
Yeah.
When they all got sacked, they all went on to Signal because that's this anonymous platform.
Oh, yeah.
And most of them are still there, but they're starting to emerge. Now that they realize they've been sacked and there's no coming back, they're more willing. But you may have heard that now the federal government is pushing back on the retirement benefits of many of these workers and on their union rights. So there's a nervousness again.
But there's no lobby group or some
Yes, there's one called Aid on the Hill. Aid on the Hill.
And when you got.
Anyone wants to reach out to me at this address, I can try to connect you through them. But I'll have to speak for you because it's like, who's this person? Do we trust them? Is she a plant or something like that?
What do you got?
I think what we have to do is contribute to we need a Congress. I mean, maybe congressmen, Democratic congresspeople are not listening because it's not a Democratic Congress. They can't get anything done. If we can get a Democratic Congress in the next election, that is our best bet for getting any of this done. And the way to do it, I think, is to contribute to ACT vote. Which
Be careful, this is a public space, we can't do
Okay.
public.
Yeah, sorry.
well, is to find an organization that gives
Supports the ideals.
that support, that will point out to you Congress people who will support your ideals.
I have a question, it's more related to you, Bill. In terms of the, oh yeah, sorry. This is a question for Bill. So in terms of volunteer community engagement, what struck me was putting together, organizing some type of volunteer-based community group that is, kind of district, if you will, within the town, and maybe they meet quarterly or something to go over training for volunteers. Should there be a natural disaster, what are some, who are the streets that you're gonna go check in on?
Yep.
And it's just all community and volunteer based. Are there things like that have
Yes.
existed that we can maybe implement within our community?
Or
Yes.
pilot in Situate,
Yeah, well-
piloting.
Well, the CERT program run by the Situate Fire Department is an excellent program. They're great people.
What's the name of
But
that?
CERT, CERT, and that is part of a national network. And the Situate Fire Department does an excellent job on their CERT program. But also, my friends at SANS and Situate Community Christmas, who are monitoring our call today, are also promoting and endorsing the idea of a pod type of thing. So exactly that. You organize an Egypt Beach piece, a Sands Hill, a Minot, a Third Cliff piece. You have a person there that's kind of the delegate for that area, and that would help us do that. So I went to go to the speak to the fire department today to tell them, look, we're not talking about disaster response without you guys here. You're in charge of that. But I think we're on very safe grounds to say that this CERT program, and then eventually this SANS thing that they are working on, that I'm going to help support. Sir.
So with all the stuff that you've been talking about, how come the insurance companies, because they're the ones that are gonna pay for this in the thing, they're the ones that are either gonna be, which they already are doing, is pricing people out of their houses, and especially in places like Florida. How come we're not getting something from them saying, if you're gonna stop doing this, we're not gonna insure the United States anymore?
Well, it's exactly what's happening. I have friends in the back row that cannot get their houses insured in Florida. And there are, what's happening in California, that if you're in a fire zone, it's gotten a lot harder and a lot more expensive. So yes, and if you don't have FEMA flood insurance,
You're out of luck.
I would, my wife will testify to this, here it comes right now. The thing that I hear the most, and this is a good little nugget, when I deploy out, it's like, this has never happened. My family has owned this farm for 150 years. I'm not in the FEMA floodplain. This has never happened in our town. And inevitably, every place I go, they were like, we did Connecticut 2 years ago. There was a dump truck floating down the street in this rather wealthy suburb of Connecticut. So FEMA flood insurance, if you're not in a floodplain, is very cheap. It's very cheap. And I don't work for them anymore, I'm not proposing it. But it also, it goes with your house, so it increases the value of your house.
But is that a strategy that we could use to send this message back to Congress indirectly?
With insurance companies?
Or with people complaining about their insurance, which is going up? I mean, I think the direct way you're not gonna get through to the group that's in charge right now, because they're not hearing anything, as Paul said, but this is one place that they could start hearing it. Oh, you did
Maybe.
XYZ and my insurance went up 25%
Can't
this
hurt.
year.
Jerry?
And then they're gonna have, that's, you sometimes have to be indirect to get direct.
Yeah. Jerry?
Billy and Paul, thank you. It's been great tonight. My question is, we have Frida here, we have Anne Marie, and we have one or two other people who are not members of AARP. How do you engage the younger people to act? Because we're on the
Such
back
a
nine.
poignant question.
Great question.
I want to piggyback on that because that struck me. And I think those of us sitting here, we must each know a 20-something with some passion. And I would just say, invite them to come with you. I did do that tonight with someone. I learned about this last minute, so that person couldn't be here. But I think we can invite our younger colleagues, counterparts, to come with us to this.
And there's things to be done in that, but I do a talk at UMass. And this presentation is completely different.
Yeah.
I've got K9 dogs and helicopters and, you know, people being rescued from the, and you're like, whoa, you know, that's pretty cool. So the message itself can be tailored to a different audience. And I think that's so vitally important. And, you know, some of the community groups that you know, I'm talking to or we're talking to now are trying to work their way through the schools to do it.
The only thing I would say is community is based in relational causes, passions, safety. And so I think it's okay for us to reach out one-on-one. I would want to feel like I could invite someone to this gathering.
Unequivocally, yeah.
And it
If there
doesn't
were-
matter what the content is. I think I can sell you to someone I know. And someone I know is going to be respectful and listen and engage.
Yeah, I mean, if we have a close enough relationship with, you know, somebody that we can influence, my friends in the back here all have college age students, some of them, very much civically minded. And we can bring them in, tell them on. You don't get this week's allowance. Yes, ma'am.
I would also like to beg you to take this to Republicans in every town.
That is,
Because many of them are going to be just as interested as we are, and they will think of other ways, or the same ways, and join those of us in.
one of our joint efforts is to get some kind of communal table to break bread at the outset. Yep. So, do we want to try to get to somebody online or should we wrap it up?
Nobody has any questions.
Thank God. Because we're barely holding on to these people. Thank you very much.